Well, Santa Ana winds are completely different. Those are winds that speed down as they come down the mountains, and they come from the opposite direction from the winds that we're seeing right now. Typically, Santa Ana's come out of the east. We have a steady westerly wind, and that is what we've seen since early this morning, since yesterday, and that's what we're expecting to continue. There's a little bit of a southerly component to this wind, and it's because there's a ridge of high pressure, the same reason behind all the heat we've experienced through the course of the week. As that high pressure begins to shift and move a little bit off to the east, then the winds are going to be changing just a little bit. I know I've heard a lot of the reporters say the winds could change in a split of a second. It technically doesn't work like that. Technically, the winds start shifting. It's almost like rotation. So most likely firefighters are ready for this to have more of a southerly component and eventually go back straight to the west, maybe a little bit to the north. I've been looking at some of the futurecast. Right now, the winds are coming out of the west at 5 miles per hour. The wind gust only averaging about 8 miles per hour. But something that's very interesting inside of any given fire is that you start creating microclimates. That heat starts rising, and sometimes the winds will start to turn within that fire, but it's in a much smaller scale. At that point, we've seen even video of those tornado-looking funnel clouds that start developing out of those fires, and that is what happens. The winds will start turning inside of a fire. Right now, averaging around 98 degrees. The excessive heat warning expired earlier this morning, and thankfully they don't have one anymore, but certainly it's hot enough for temperatures to still be extremely difficult for firefighters or anyone that's on the ground right now. They're going to need plenty of fluids also to hydrate. The winds will stay mostly out of the west, and I do want to show you what the futurecast looks like for the next 6 hours or so. So tonight we'll keep those winds right around 5-10 miles per hour. Once you start going over 10, it gets a little bit more tricky for firefighters. Then we go into the nighttime and the winds will start to subside, but it's also overnight when the winds will start doing that turning of the wind that we typically see in that region of the county. You can see that arrow in Ramona coming straight out of the west. That's where that wind is coming from right now. But if I go to our futurecast, let's see if this advances real quick. I want to take you to 7:30, still out of the west. We get a little bit later into the nighttime, and that's where the winds will start turning in areas like Escondido. Ramona still has the wind out of the west, but it's going to be relatively light, and it'll be nice and calm into the overnight hours, which will continue to help our firefighters. The direction remains steady in that same location, but is around it. We have that terrain that typically kind of blocks that area from those winds to turn a little too much, but to the west, that's where we'll see the winds changing a little bit more. Escondido, closer to Poway, and just to the north, but that's still kind of far out from the given location. Hot, not relatively too humid today in that area, but there's still plenty of ample moisture in the air, and the conditions, we've talked about this. The year before, we had a lot of rain. There was a lot of green. Last year, very dry, which has allowed for a lot of the brush and the forest that we have in that area to just kind of become fuel for any of those fires. So the main concern here is the heat right now. The winds, not so much.
Thanks so much, Angelica.